I never really pictured myself typing something like this out on a late-night Reddit confession thread, especially not at 47, when most guys my age are posting about home repairs, knee pain, or their kids graduating. Yet here I am, sitting in the dim light of my apartment, realizing that sometimes your past refuses to stay politely behind you. It taps, then knocks, then kicks the damn door down. Before I go any further, let me be clear, I'm not writing this for pity. I'm not writing it to be dramatic or to craft some edgy, cinematic, criminal past moment. I'm writing it because this one memory, this one mistake, has lived in my head like an unwelcome roommate for over 2 decades. And lately it's been louder than usual, like it wants something from me. This story isn't about the worst thing I ever did, though it was pretty bad, but it's the one that left a mark I can still feel. It's the kind of memory where, if I close my eyes, I can still smell the industrial dust of the warehouse, hear the low hum of the fluorescent lights, and feel that mix of adrenaline and dread crawling up my spine. Back then I was 26, broke, angry, exhausted, and stupid enough to think the universe owed me a break. I worked nights at a distribution warehouse for electronics, which is corporate speak for a giant building full of expensive things guarded by people who were paid way too little to care. Phones, laptops, tablets, some regular stock, some high-end stuff that was supposed to be hush-hush. And at that point in my life, the idea that so much money's worth of gear was sitting there while I couldn't even afford my rent felt like some cosmic joke at my expense. My girlfriend had left 2 months prior, not dramatically, just tired of the stagnant life we were living. I was behind on bills. My car made noises that sounded like metal crying. And every morning, after finishing a night shift, I'd sit in that freezing warehouse break room, thinking, how did I end up here? And how do I get out? That's when the idea first slithered its way into my thoughts. I didn't act on it immediately. I'm not one of those people who wakes up and suddenly decides to commit a crime like it's a bucket list item. It was more like erosion. A slow wearing down of judgment, chipped away by fear, desperation, and a little bit of bitterness at the world. I didn't know then, though I probably should have, that the hardest part of a bad decision isn't the planning or even the doing. It's living with the version of yourself who made it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the story of the night I crossed the line, quietly, clumsily, stupidly, and discovered that once you step over that line, there's no clean way back. The idea didn't crash into my mind all at once like some reckless bolt of inspiration. It seeped in slowly, quietly, the way a draft sneaks in under a door. One night I was walking my usual inspection loop through the warehouse when I spotted a pallet with a bright orange label. Special handling, priority. Those words were like bait dangling in front of a guy who was already halfway drowning. I knew what labels like that meant. It wasn't just regular stock. It was high-value devices, sometimes prototypes, sometimes limited shipments meant for companies with more money than sense. I remember staring at that crate and thinking, one of those boxes probably costs more than I make in a month. And then the next thought came just as easily, one crate could change everything. Not make me rich, I was never that delusional, but just enough to buy myself breathing room. Enough to get a working car. Enough to get my landlord off my back. Enough to stop feeling like life was a boot pressing down on my chest. That's how bad ideas win ground. They don't come in shouting, "Let's commit a crime!" They whisper, "This could fix everything." And when you're tired, broke, and feeling invisible, that whisper sounds a lot like hope. If I'm being brutally honest, and I'm too old now to sugarcoat it, it wasn't just the money. Sure, I told myself it was. Rent, car repairs, food. All the righteous reasons. But the truth was darker and pettier. I was resentful. Every day I watched coworkers around me buy houses, talk about taking vacations with their families, brag about bonuses. Meanwhile, I was counting coins at gas stations and pretending I didn't hear my stomach growl on long shifts. I felt like I was running in place while everyone else kept moving forward. And then there was the shame. The quiet kind that builds up when you're too embarrassed to admit you feel left behind. I didn't want to admit it then, but the theft became symbolic in my mind, like taking something back from a world that had been cheating me since the start. Twisted logic, I know. But resentment has a way of reshaping your thoughts until wrong things feel justified, even righteous. I spent a week studying the warehouse routine with a level of attention I'd never used for anything productive. I learned which cameras were real and which were just there for show. I memorized the timing of the manager's rounds, the forklift operator's smoke breaks, the dead zones where no one ever walked. I wasn't planning with the precision of a mastermind. Don't picture anything glamorous. It was more like frantic mental note-taking by a guy terrified of getting caught. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Isolate one crate. Stash it. Somehow get it out later. That, somehow, was supposed to magically figure itself out. In my mind, everything felt doable because I needed it to be. When you're desperate, reality gets blurry, and maybe starts sounding a lot like. Definitely. The night I chose to finally act, everything felt wrong. My hands trembled so badly I kept wiping them on my pants, leaving dark streaks that made me look like I'd fallen into an oil drum. My heartbeat wasn't fast, it was heavy, like it was trying to punch its way out of my ribs. Every sound was louder. The hum of the lights seemed like a warning alarm. The rhythm of the conveyor belts felt like a countdown. I must have walked past that special handling pallet a dozen times before I even dared to touch it. I kept telling myself I could walk away. That I should walk away. But the longer I hesitated, the more inevitable it felt. Like the decision had already been made days earlier, and I was just catching up to it. I waited for the forklift operator, Dave, a guy so predictable he could have been used to set clocks, to wander out for his cigarette break. The moment he disappeared behind the loading dock door, I moved. Peeling the plastic off the pallet felt absurdly dramatic, like I was unwrapping evidence in a crime drama. The crate was heavier than I expected. I ended up dragging it instead of lifting it, wincing every time it scraped the concrete. Every scrape sounded like a thunderclap. I pushed it behind a stack of mismarked boxes, products no one touched because the labels were wrong, possibly from years back. It was the closest thing to a blind spot in the whole warehouse. When the crate finally settled into place, I stepped back and felt a jolt of terror so sharp it made my teeth hurt. That was the moment the crime became real. Standing there, staring at the hidden crate, I felt something I still struggle to describe. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even fear, at least not the simple kind. It was more like stepping off a cliff and realizing halfway down that you can't climb back up. My breath felt thin, my mouth dry. Sweat ran down my spine even though the warehouse was freezing. And in my head, a single sentence looped over and over. You can't undo this now. I remember pressing my palms against my thighs, grounding myself, trying to believe the lie that this would all go smoothly. But deep down, a part of me already knew I'd made a mistake I would never fully recover from. 30 minutes later, when I was trying desperately to act normal, the night manager, a guy named Hughes, decided to do a spontaneous walkthrough. He never did walkthroughs at night. Ever. He preferred sitting in his office, watching sports recaps, and pretending to look busy. So when I saw his silhouette enter my aisle, my stomach dropped like I'd swallowed a bowling ball. He didn't find the crate, thank God, but he lingered. He inspected random boxes, muttered something about inventory discrepancies, and made notes on his clipboard that I'm convinced were blank pages. The whole time I felt like I was vibrating, terrified he'd hear my heart pounding. That was the moment I realized I wasn't cut out for crime. I could barely handle someone casually walking nearby, let alone real scrutiny. Just when I thought the worst was over, my coworker Rob came shuffling into the aisle. Rob was the kind of guy who always wore mismatched socks and forgot his own locker combination at least twice a month. But on that night, he might as well have been a trained investigator. He saw me standing near the hiding spot, pale and twitchy, and laughed. "Dude, you look like you just saw a ghost." I forced out a laugh so awkward it surprised even me. I made up something about being tired, but my voice cracked halfway through, which only made Rob tease me more. He grabbed a roll of packing tape and wandered off, oblivious, thank God, to the panic attack he just triggered in me. After he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that he noticed something, even if he didn't know what. When my shift ended, everyone else clocked out and headed home. I didn't. I lingered in the break room pretending to look for something in my backpack while waiting for the day's shift to start. I needed the security guard who never checked anything, Johnson, to be on duty. The man could sign off on a nuclear warhead if you told him it was a standard delivery. When he finally arrived, yawning and carrying a giant thermos of coffee, I felt a dizzy wave of relief. I wheeled the crate out from its hiding place, doing my best to look casual even though I was sweating like I'd run a marathon. My fingers tingled. My legs felt like stiff wires. Every step toward the exit felt like walking across a tightrope. Just as I was nearing the back door, the delivery driver, early as always, showed up. His name was Tim. Big guy. Too observant for his own good. He glanced at the crate, then at me. "Didn't know we had an outgoing this morning," he said, sipping his coffee. My brain shut down for a full second. Then I blurted out something about inventory mismatch corrections and supplier return protocols. It was incoherent nonsense, but Tim just shrugged and said he needed another cup of coffee before caring about anything. He walked off, blissfully uninterested. I nearly collapsed with relief. When I reached the exit, Johnson barely glanced up. I handed him the clipboard, a fake form I'd scribbled together that looked like a bored child had filled it out. He signed it instantly. Just like that, I walked out of the warehouse with a crate worth more than everything I owned combined. The morning sky was a soft pink-orange, the kind you might call beautiful if you weren't currently committing a felony. I remember pausing for a moment, and thinking how wrong it felt that the world looked so calm while I was doing something so chaotic and stupid. Then I loaded the crate into my car, hands trembling the whole time. I didn't get caught. Not then. Not ever, officially. But the warehouse exploded into chaos within 48 hours. Emergency meetings. Managers storming around. People getting questioned one by one. You could practically taste the panic in the air. They fired Dave, the forklift operator, the guy who took predictable smoke breaks and never bothered anyone. They said it was negligence. It wasn't, of course. It was just convenient. I remember looking at him as he cleaned out his locker, his face blank in that stunned, quiet way people get when the world suddenly turns unfair. And I knew, right then, that I wasn't the only one paying for my decision. Guilt hit me harder than fear ever had. For weeks after, sleep was a stranger. Every noise made me flinch. Every conversation felt like a trap. I avoided my coworkers. I avoided looking in mirrors. I avoided thinking about what I'd done, which of course meant I thought about it constantly. The money I made from selling the stolen items felt dirty, cursed almost. I paid my rent. I fixed my car. I bought groceries that weren't instant noodles. And none of it felt good. I expected to feel relief, maybe even satisfaction. Instead, I felt hollow. Smaller. Like I'd chipped away at something inside myself that I didn't know was fragile until it was already broken. The worst part? No one knew except me. And that made it feel even heavier. Looking back now, I can see exactly how young and stupid I was. I thought one crime would fix my life, or at least buy me time to figure things out. Instead, it changed the way I saw myself forever. I carried that night with me. Not like a cool story or some badge of rebellion. More like a stain, one that doesn't wash out even after decades. I moved cities. Changed jobs. Built a decent life. But the memory is still there, sitting quietly in the back of my mind. If someone reading this is where I was back then, drowning, desperate, angry at the world, let me tell you something. Taking something that isn't yours will not save you. It won't fix your life. It won't make things easier. It will follow you. Maybe not legally. But emotionally? Morally? Internally? You can't outrun the version of yourself who crossed that line. If I could speak to my 26-year-old self, I wouldn't yell at him or lecture him. I'd just tell him that the hardest part of growing up isn't avoiding mistakes, it's learning to forgive yourself when you've already made one. And that sometimes, walking away from a bad decision is braver than going through with it.